Woo! It's the boy, Bubba, let's coming through. Hella clutch, flawless, can't be touched. It's your boy, Bubba, let's. Yeah, I need that hot take. I need the truth and everything that is not fake. So tell me who's the GOAT, I'll tell you who's not great. And which team always make you go right way. Yeah.
And welcome back to another episode of the Bubba Lutz Sports Podcast, everybody. I am your host, Bubba Lutz, and this is episode 121, where we're focusing on our weekly episodic series on the Dallas Cowboys, the Cowboys Roundup. I talk about everything from news, speculation, and rumors, and my overall opinions on the Dallas Cowboys. This week we're focusing on the free agency and continuing our topic on that since there's no sports going on right now. But signings, rumors of signings, this is a continuation of what we were doing last week. And the Cowboys just continue to be aggressive in this free agency off season, and the big name that came with it is Dontari Poe. Now, before we get into that, make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel if you're watching this right now. If you're not subscribed, what the hell are you doing? We're still on 57 subscribers. If you can subscribe to the channel, put on that bell, or turn on that bell for notifications, alerts when we go live streams, or we put up new episodes on the podcast. And if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow the podcast and continue to support. You know, we've had a really good stretch over the last half a year, even more than that now. I think we're 7-8 months into really grinding out the podcast. And we started off this with 57 episodes, and now we're at 121. Continue to put that out and do it at a high level. And I appreciate every single one of you guys, saying on Twitter, DMing me or texting me saying hey, keep up the good work on the podcast, and you're having conversation with me on Twitter. It's amazing. I love having them, and I hope that you value my opinion and you appreciate the entertainment that I'm giving to you guys in a tough time. It really is a tough time. But thank you again for listening, for watching, and continue to support the podcast. And Dontari Poe, man. Dontari Poe listens to the podcast. Even better, because I'm going to praise him right now. Agrees to sign with the Cowboys, was recently with the Carolina Panthers, and was mostly known in his career for playing with the Kansas City Chiefs, being a defensive menace, but also having his time on the offensive side of the ball, getting that touchdown as a fullback, being at the goal line. And Dontari Poe, man, is a big dude. This is a huge signing for the Dallas Cowboys, and he's actually rejoining Gerald McCoy, who they signed last week on a 3-year deal. Carolina did have Gerald McCoy and Dontari Poe at the same time last season, and they're rejoining as teammates now, which is awesome because they already have that chemistry, but also already putting up those numbers previous to Carolina with all their respective teams. And this is a great thing for the Dallas Cowboys, getting what they need. It's the sentence that I'm going to talk about this offseason, because that's exactly what it is. In previous off seasons, it's the sexy picks. It's those sexy free agent signings or those big name contracts that do come at a price that have plagued the Cowboys or have not necessarily helped the Cowboys in general. When we think about Terrell Owens, those are the big names. Even with the coaching decision that was going to happen this offseason, before Mike McCarthy, it was Lincoln Riley, it was Urban Meyer. No one really expected Mike McCarthy to be that name because it just didn't roll off the tongue. It didn't come out good for Cowboys fans to go that's the guy we need. That wasn't the sexy pick that Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones are accustomed to making ever since really, buying the organization. They want to go for that big name, right? Even in trade talks and signings that they had during last season and this offseason, it's Jamal Adams. It's those big names, and yet, even in wide receiver, Emmanuel Sanders, big names that stand out, yet they're getting what they need. They're not getting just for the hell of it. They're doing it because they need it, especially at the defensive line, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Think of how many moves the Cowboys have made on the defensive side of the ball. Clinton Dix, Maurice Kennedy, now Dontari Poe. They re-signed Sean Lee. They re-signed Joe Thomas. Who else? They got rid of a lot of guys on defense as well, Byron Jones, and re-signing Anthony Brown. You have all these different moves, but it all connects to each other of saying, all right, we lost this guy, now we got to replace him. How are we going to do that? We're never going to replace the name of Byron Jones. But if we can get depth and we can learn into this new scheme, then it'll work out. It it'll work because we're not stuck under the same Rod Marinelli system and scheme that we're so used to in the past, 7-8 years or even more. And even though there's no contract details yet on Dontari Poe, I expect the Cowboys to have signed him to an easy 1-year deal that's not a lot of money because of what's been going on this offseason of signing guys like Clinton Dix and Gerald McCoy to really affordable and smart contracts. Clinton Dix only getting 1 year, but at most $4 million. Gerald McCoy signing a longer-term deal at 3 years, $18 million. A big name like that, you expect a lot more money out of him, but it was smart by the Cowboys to sign these guys, to sign more depth at the cornerback position, get a safety finally, get a edge rusher or a defensive tackle. You can say that for Poe. You could say that for Gerald McCoy, but not break the bank. They had a lot of salary cap space this offseason, and they're making the most of it. They're not just blowing it with one big name or one player. I still think that their decision to franchise Dak, it was a bad one because they could have signed him in last season, like early on last season, and that was their mistake, and now they're paying for it by only franchising him and taking a hit on the money part of it right there. Overall, though, they're making up for it. They really are. Like I said, this is what they need. This is what they're supposed to do in this offseason. And Mike McCarthy has come out and said that, look, the Rod Marinelli scheme just didn't work, and it was kind of old-fashioned because he tried to fit the guys into their system rather than focusing on the player and growing off of that. That's kind of how Rod Marinelli did it. Was he tried to do it as a Patriots type of way. And he said, we just got to plug in someone. Our scheme will never change. It's just we got to fit players into that rather than getting talented guys and then working off of that. With the signing Dontari Poe, this is a complete 180 of what Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys will most likely do this next season. Is instead of going with that 3-4 type of scheme with 3 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen, and their real concern was the inside part of that defensive line, now they're going to move to a 4-3. And you'll have Dontari Poe, you'll have Gerald McCoy most likely on the edge, and then you'll have DeMarcus Lawrence. So you only have 3 rushers up front, but you also have some longevity to work with on the linebacker position or edge rushing as well. So I love the move because you have that athleticism at the linebacker position with Van Der Esch, Jalen Smith, Sean Lee, and if you put in Gerald McCoy, Dontari Poe, I expect just immense amount of pressure and aggression on this defensive line. Because Dontari Poe is such a good signing, to me, it's immediately thinking, well, you consider what he was in Kansas City and what he was in Carolina, even using him as an offensive fullback. It's like, this man is a presence. This man is beefy. He's girthy. He is size for the Dallas Cowboys, which they have not had on that inside defensive line. They had the edge rushing for sure with Robert Quinn, and they had DeMarcus Lawrence. They have those agile guys that can get that first step and work with their hands very well. But their inside portion is where they lack because of the injuries that occurred with Tyron Crawford, and he has not lived up to his contract. Now, he is a bigger guy, yet he hasn't performed to the contract that they paid him. The loss that really hurt the Cowboys over these last couple of years was David Irving. And I've said it from day one when he left the NFL, and there was the whole controversy with him and marijuana and how they didn't want him in the league. Same thing with Jason Garrett. He's going to be a more important player for the Cowboys in these upcoming years than DeMarcus Lawrence, in my opinion. And that's because of the length and the size of David Irving. That man was one of a kind. He was tall, he was agile, but he was strong as hell, and he took up a lot of that defensive line. There was no holding him back with just one player. You had to double team him, but there's no way you could with DeMarcus Lawrence right next to him. David Irving was a huge loss for the Dallas Cowboys, and they have not recovered from that at all. Tyron Crawford hasn't lived up at that position. You have Antoine Woods, who has probably been the best inside defensive player for the Cowboys at that line. in the last couple of years. Kind of up in the air of what they're going to do with him. I think they do have the exclusive rights to Antoine Woods. So if they sign him, it's going to be for a really minimal contract, which they can afford right now. So getting him back would be nice to be some depth at that defensive line. Yet moving to a 4-3, then you can take away the type of weakness that you have inside. And signing Dontari Poe, signing Gerald McCoy, it's the biggest concern that the Cowboys have, and they've solved it, in my opinion. Now, they can get another edge rusher, another defensive lineman in the draft. Now, they don't have to go super high at 17 right now, especially with these signings. It's just a matter of figuring out the problems at that rushing defense. That was their biggest thing. That was the biggest weakness for the Dallas Cowboys last year, and why they lost against the Rams in 2018 was the fact that they could not stop the run. And how would they run? They go straight down the middle. There was absolutely no way that a defense like the Cowboys, who lacks in that inside tackle position, could stop a C.J. Anderson in 2018. They couldn't stop a Derrick Henry, even a Sony Michel, who isn't a bigger guy. But they just didn't have the size. They didn't have the aggression inside, and now they do, which I love. So now the line could look like McCoy, Poe, DeMarcus Lawrence. You can add Antoine Woods to that, and then you have Jalen Smith and Van Der Esch, who can rush as well. I expect a lot more blitzing coming out of Mike Nolan and that defensive side of the ball on the coaching staff, which I love so far. And then, like we talked about, moving to the 4-3 scheme. And, I mean, I love the signing. I really do. Because it's big name, but not a huge depth to the salary cap, and they're solving what they need now. Probably right now, their biggest concern is the cornerback position. Haha Klindix is a great safety. Let's see where they go on the other safety position route. Whether they go for a guy that they've had already, or they look at depth in the draft. But cornerback is their biggest issue right now. And, I mean, yeah, I just love the Poe signing. I really do. With Gerald McCoy and Poe together, it could be a great move. I like it. I like it a lot. And it's being aggressive as far as free agents go for the Dallas Cowboys. Another signing that happened right around the same time, Blake Bell. If you don't know who that is, because you're like, who? Blake Bell, tight end out of Kansas City. The man has been in the league since 2015, came out of Oklahoma State. And actually, when I was looking this up, or he came from Oklahoma, excuse me. I just wanted to know some background on him, seeing where he came from, who he played with. He actually played with the 49ers at the beginning part of his career. 2015 was probably his best year because he had a lot of snaps, a lot of receptions. And then he went to Jacksonville for a little bit and found his way to Kansas City, where, of course, he's not going to be the number one guy there because of Travis Kelce. So he's not going to be the number one guy in Dallas. Yet I think this is a great move for the Cowboys. This is their response to Jason Witten moving on to Las Vegas with the Raiders, and also figuring out the tight end 2 position because of the fact that Blake Jarwin's going to be your number one. He's more like a receiver, but if you want to run a 2 tight end set now, it's not obvious when you're putting Dalton Schultz out there because you know you're going to run. That's his main job, is run blocking. And that's why they drafted him from Stanford. He's a run block type of tight end. He doesn't catch a lot of passes. That's more Blake Jarwin's position. But now if you put Blake Bell at the second position of the tight end, you have a lot more freedom. And the reason why I mentioned Oklahoma is because Blake Jarwin is also from Oklahoma State. So they both played in the Big 12. You see a lot more offensive heavy usage of tight ends in the Big 12 because you're running a fast-paced offense. They know how to block as well because there's a lot of great running backs coming out of the Big 12. They need blocking. So if you have Blake Jarwin, who's great at blocking, better as a receiver, and now you have Blake Bell, who's a great blocker, but also another hands-on receiver, tight end type of guy, this is another weapon for Dak Prescott, even though if you want to disguise it as a play-action pass or a read option, you can either go to Bell, you can either go to Blake Jarwin. Blake Bell might be that guy that gets you that 3 or 4 yards on first down, or even that third down play. He can take over that Jason Wynn position, but now you have more agility. You have a younger, fresher guy, only at 29 years old. He can be that faster tight end that Jason Wynn wanted to be last year. But now you can still have Blake Jarwin and be that weapon, essentially. And at some point, you want to see Blake Jarwin get a double team. You got Bell on the other side of the field getting that quick extra 3 or 4 yards. And I like the move. Now with Dalton Schultz being at 3 and then Bell at 2, Jarwin at 1, you don't need to worry about a tight end anymore. I've seen a lot of mock drafts by a lot of analysts on Twitter saying that the Cowboys should look at a tight end like right around the 5th or 6th round. I'm like, do you really need a tight end at this point? Because you have your 3 main guys. Like, you can still keep Dalton Schultz. In my opinion, Dalton Schultz isn't a liability. By all means, I thought Jason Wynn was more of a liability. So I like having Dalton Schultz on the field. It's the problem of it was so predictable, because if Dalton Schultz was on the field and he was the only tight end, you know you're going to run it. There was no way that he was going to get the ball from a Dak Prescott throw. It just wouldn't happen. So a lot of predictability out of the Cowboys offense if Dalton Schultz was on the field. With Bell on the field, it could be 50-50. And also if you have Jarwin on the field, even more of a threat offensively against these defenses. Another signing by another team actually is Kerry Hyder. He signed with the San Francisco 49ers. Think of how many great defensive linemen and defensive players the San Francisco 49ers have. And honestly, Kerry Hyder is a great addition to that. I'd hoped that Jim Tomsula, the new defensive line coach, would have loved Kerry Hyder, and I wish he could have used him, seen what he could have done with Hyder. To me, same idea with David Irving. Kerry Hyder is a great number 2 guy, and he took the snaps when DeMarcus Lawrence was feeling a little bit hurt or if he was tired. Kerry Hyder would come in, and you could feel the presence. Not a big guy, not a immense amount of strength out of Hyder. He was fast, he was agile, he had a great first step. And when he was on the field, you can feel him and you could hear that name, because every time he was on the field, it was noticeable. And I loved it about Hyder. He was an aggressive, very high-octane guy, even though he had a low amount of snaps. He was a low-risk, high-yield type of guy. And he just didn't get the snaps because of DeMarcus Lawrence. And DeMarcus Lawrence never wants to get off the field. But when he has to, Hyder takes over. And I think this is going to be one of the biggest losses for the Dallas Cowboys this offseason. I love Hyder. I love him so much. I wish they could have used him more, because he ran the stunts very well. And if Jim Tomsula had the opportunity to use him, I think he would have taken full advantage of Kerry Hyder. So signing with San Francisco is a huge move for Kerry Hyder and the 49ers. They get a great depth guy who's fast. They're going to use him pretty efficiently. Not like, you could probably go back to like low risk, high yield type of snaps where he's not there on the field a lot. When he is, you're going to notice him. And this will be one of the biggest losses for the Dallas Cowboys. And finally, as we wrap up this podcast, Travis Frederick, of course, how can we forget the name, retiring at 29. And yes, this is the loss of the offseason for the Dallas Cowboys, along with Byron Jones. Business-wise, this is $11 million in dead money for the Dallas Cowboys, and they really won't get much out of it to compensate. And he still had a few more years in his contract. So they're going to hurt for this for a while, not only in the money sense, but also on the field. Travis Frederick is that durability guy. He has been one of the just pillars of the Dallas Cowboys for so many years, ever since he got drafted from Wisconsin. And one of the best centers to ever play. Well, if you disagree with that, I want you to look at every single part, or little film, little play that you can find on Travis Frederick. Look at his highlights. The man was a lockdown center. He was what Sean Lee is on defense. He can name every single one of those linebackers. He will know exactly what they're doing and will go off of that and protect Dak Prescott from that point on, or even when he was playing with Tony Romo. He is the mind behind the offense. And to lose a guy like that at such a young age, only 29, he still had so many years left to work with. The tragedy of him having to go away for a year and not play for a year due to that autoimmune disease was horrible. It was a shot in the gut for Travis, for the Dallas Cowboys and fans everywhere, because you never want to see a guy that is a Walter Payton Man of the Year type of guy. And on and off the field, he did everything right. And he deserved that contract. He deserved every single penny of that contract. And he deserves to be in the Ring of Honor and the Hall of Fame immediately. I mean, Ring of Honor, Jerry Jones should already put him in there. Hall of Fame, whenever he's the first year that he can do it, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Without a doubt. He is one of the best centers to ever play. And to go away like this, the reason why he retired is because of that autoimmune disease and having to deal with it. He talked about it in the little statement that he put out on Twitter announcing his retirement, talking about the struggles of him having to deal with the autoimmune disease during last year or 2 years ago, and then having to deal with it during last season where he was still playing. You did sense that he was not himself. Like he wasn't playing at the same level that he did prior. He was still an elite center. He still made the Pro Bowl last year as well. You didn't feel like he was 100% there, but even at less than 100%, Travis Frederick is still one of the best centers in the NFL. He talked about how it was just difficult for him to deal with that and also deal with stuff at home with his family and with his health. So for him to retire, it's the same idea that I feel with Andrew Luck or with a lot of these other guys like Luke Kuechly, who also retired at 29. Health is their biggest thing, and they don't feel that jeopardizing their health for the love of football is worth it, based on what we've seen in so many years of research and in doctor reports, and especially with Frederick and his particular situation with the autoimmune disease. You never want football to be the reason why something goes bad. If he can take care of himself, if he feels that it's not worth it and it's a danger for him to be on the field, I am all for it for him to retire. By no means do I think that Frederick backed out or he cowered out. The people that talk about how he disrespected the Cowboys by just retiring straight up and making them lose money like this. Same thing with Jason Witten, where he just retired out of nowhere right before the draft. Like, how can you blame someone who you have no idea what they've gone through as far as their health goes? The amount of punishment that the NFL, and especially at that position, does to your body at such a young age. Would you want to stay if you go on that field every single time and say, I might not get off this field. I might not go off on my own 2 feet. This disease might kill me. And football is only making it worse. At what point do you think that that's not a smart idea to walk away? For Frederick to make this decision, a durable guy, a tough guy, one of the most respected players and men in the NFL, for him to make that decision, which was very hard, all respect to him. I do not have any remorse or any bad blood with Travis Frederick at all, and no Cowboys fan should. This man gave it his all. He battled through diseases, through injuries, to play for the Dallas Cowboys, and he still playing at a high level. For him to make this decision, all respect to him. Best of luck to Travis Frederick. Hope he feels better. Praying that his health will always continue to be good, especially in a tough time like this. I wish him nothing but the best. I could see him as an analyst or as a commentator immediately. ESPN, Fox should pick him up right now. And if he wants to stay with the Cowboys as a coach, I see him as a coach too. This guy can be a great offensive lineman's coach, or even an offensive coordinator, because he's that damn good at recognizing defenses. I love it. I see him in the NFL for a long time, just not as a player. All respect to him, man. All respect to him, and I wish him nothing but the best. And for the Cowboys, this is a tough loss. Yet they have something to work with here. Do I think they should go for a center? In my opinion, no. I think Joe Looney, who is by no means a Travis Frederick, is still a great center. He's fun. He's loved in the locker room. He has been with the Cowboys for enough time to recognize what type of chemistry and what type of offense they're running. He's had some snaps with the first team, due to the fact that Travis wants to get healthier. And, they're still stacked on the offensive line. And they still have some guys that you can say, like, hey, they can work with him. Connor McGovern, we'll probably see him as a guard. But I think I did hear or read somewhere where they said that they could use him at center, which would be nice because they can actually use Connor McGovern. And from the draft, like they have some high hopes for Connor McGovern. I think Joe Looney is a good replacement for now. If you want to go for a center in the draft, okay. I don't say you go in the first 2 or 3 rounds with it. Like, it was kind of the same thing that happened with the tight end position 2 years ago with Jason Witten when he retired the day of the draft. And then the Cowboys were like, well, shit, like, we need to find something. And then it was like Dallas Goedert, and the Eagles picked him a pick before the Cowboys. But that's when Cowboys fans were freaking out. It's like, oh my God, we need a tight end now. I'm like, no, you don't. You never need a tight end because Jason Witten was the anchor to that position. Jason Witten should have retired a long time ago. So I think Cowboys fans are freaking out, and I've had some people freak out about it already, thinking like, oh my God, we got to draft someone. We gotta get a free agent. And I said Joe Looney, and they're like, that's not Travis Frederick. I'm like, do you think Travis Frederick guys like centers like that just walk up and say, I'm here? And you think you can just pick from like 10 of them? No. There's only a few guys like Travis Frederick that come around every 5 to 10 years. And somehow the Cowboys pick up offensive linemen like it's nothing. They do it in the draft in the past 10 years. They've done it with Tyron Smith. They've done it with Zach Martin, Lyle Collins, Travis Frederick. Recently, they haven't had the best of luck with Connor Williams, Cameron Fleming, and then the whole debacle with the Atlanta Falcons, Chaz Green. So the root of that offensive line, it's still there. They still have a stacked offensive line. It hurts to not have a Travis Frederick at that center position, but I think Joe Looney is a great replacement for now, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't need to freak out about that position right now. So, but best of luck to Frederick, man. This is the big thing, is that his health is number one. His health is the most important thing. He's got to think of a family. He's got to think of his life. Football is not that important. You think of so many players that are being criticized for leaving their team or for retiring, and a lot of people are giving them shit for it. Those people are incompetent. Those people don't deserve a voice. It's hard to do it in a social media era like this. Like, I try my best to use my voice to build a persona, build a channel, build a environment or community. But I don't use it to just bash everyone I can. I do it for my opinion. I do it for my followers and value their opinions as well. I don't just go out there and say, this man is a piece of shit. This man doesn't deserve money. And F him for leaving the Cowboys. This guy doesn't deserve to be in the league. He doesn't like, I have my moments where I joke around, like, say with like Cam Newton or with any one of these other players where I just don't have a nice thing to say about him, but I don't go out of my way to make sure that they hear me, or I go out of my way to make sure they're hurt or to hurt someone else. I do it for the fun. I do it for my channel. I do it for this, right? But there are reasons behind it. It's not just me just waking up and saying, I'm going to hate this guy. I'm going to hate this guy. Well, Travis, I got the notification and I was devastated. But as soon as I read that statement saying, like, my health I need to focus on my health. Dude, go right ahead. Andrew Luck getting booed for retiring was the most disrespectful thing I've seen in sports in a very long time. That man has been through everything with the Indianapolis Colts. They treated him horribly in his first few years in Indy. They didn't give him an offensive line. This man had a lacerated spleen. He had bad shoulders. He got banged up, broken ribs. Yet he gave it his all every single time on the field. He had concussions. He had multiple surgeries, multiple injuries. And he kept coming back, and finally they gave him the offensive line, but it was a little bit too little too late. And your response to him saying, all these years, and I haven't focused on my health, I've focused on football and the love of the game, it's not fun for me anymore, and I don't love it anymore because it's just not worth it. You know, all those surgeries. I need to take care of myself, and you boo him? That's disrespectful, man. So I'm not going to come out here and purposely say a man wanting to focus on his own life rather than football, and rather focus on that than on the team I like, team I love in the Cowboys. I got no ill will to him. Absolutely not. And if you do, you got the wrong podcast, my friend. You ain't talking to the right guy. You ain't gonna get that opinion out of me. You're not gonna get what you want to hear. You really will not. So, but that's gonna do it for this episode of the Bubble Let Sports Podcast, the Cowboys roundup of the week. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to follow on all platforms. And we'll see you next time on the Bubble Let Sports Podcast.
Now do you keep it classy or you keep it ratchet? For the man with the magic. Now who is he? It's the boy Bubba Lutz coming through. Hella clutch, flawless, can't be touched. It's a boy Bubba Lutz. Yeah, I need that hot take. I need the truth and everything that is not fake. So tell me who's the GOAT, I'll tell you who's not great. And which team always make you go right way.